Thank you for participating in the North Fork Kings Groundwater Sustainability webinar. My name is Crystal Tufankshin, and I'm one of your presenters today. Eric Osterling will also be presenting. We both work for the Kings River Conservation District. The North Fork Kings GSA, or the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, has contracted with KRCD to help with administration and outreach. We'll be placing, or we have the participants on mute, but if you have a question, please use the chat box there at the bottom of your control panel. We're going to be answering questions after we finish the presentation. Also, if you want to shrink down that menu up on the top of your GoToMeeting menu on the right-hand corner, just on the left of the X, there's two arrows, and that allows you to shrink that down if you want to see the screen better. So I'm going to start out by just covering who the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is and what the new law is about. And I'm going to just highlight that because the bulk of this is going to be about the groundwater assessment, and Eric Ostrom will be covering that portion of the presentation. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was designed to be locally implemented, and it has four components. The first one is the formation of the Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, and this has been completed because the deadline for that was June 30th, 2017. At that time, actually 266 agencies were formed in the state of California, and we were one of those agencies, the North Fork Kings Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The other three components are our developing plan, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, and this has to be done by 2020. And then once that is done, we have 20 years to implement the plan. So by 2040, we have to be sustainable in the Keene Subbasin. And I'll just provide an overview of what the plan is about, just so you have an idea in some future slides. Now, the new groundwater law gave the Groundwater Sustainability Agencies specific responsibilities and powers. So at the very top, you see one of our main responsibilities really is to develop this groundwater sustainability plan. And all of these powers that are listed on this graph are to support the Groundwater Sustainability Agency's ability to achieve the sustainability requirements of the state law. So that's the North Fork Kings Groundwater Sustainability Agency has all of these responsibilities and authorities. So right now we're working on developing that groundwater sustainability plan. As I mentioned earlier, the law requires us to have that done by January 31st, 2020. There are some groundwater sustainability agencies in the state that actually have additional 2 years. But we do not, because we're in a high priority basin that has been designated as critically overdrafted. The state has specific items that it has said and stated in law that must be included in a groundwater sustainability agency. One is you have to have a physical description of a groundwater management area. So this would include the groundwater conditions that are occurring underneath our territory. We just had a board meeting in February, and one of our technical consultants from the Pritchard, which is a local engineering firm, shared some preliminary research which stated that we actually have a very complex North Fork Kings Groundwater Sustainability Agency geology. So those are things we're going to have to look at closely as we develop this plan. We also have to have a water budget. So that's basically what is flowing into our territory, what's flowing out of our territory. Sort of like a bank account. We have to understand that. It sounds simple, but there's a lot of technical studies and reports that will have to be done to understand all of this. The plan will also define a series of measurable objectives and thresholds to be operated within in order to remain on course towards the sustainability goal. Many of these items, as I said, require technical studies, and we're also going to have to consider an annual reporting process that we have to report to the state annually, and then every 5 years actually check in and make sure we're completing and achieving our objectives. So all of this is going to cost money, and it's going to be estimated that's about $1 million to complete this plan. And that is one of the items, the cost items that we're including in this assessment that we're going to present to you today. Now, the good news about that is that we did apply for a grant, we're successful, and we're going to receive about $200,000 to offset the cost of developing this plan. And the North Fork Kings Groundwater Sustainability Board members, they're going to continue to pursue other funding sources like grants to help offset the cost of implementing SGMA. So what you see listed on this slide are 6 criteria that the law has requires us to consider in a groundwater sustainability plan. So defining these criteria for the North Fork Kings will be the roadmap to our sustainability. The only undesirable result is listed here, one of these criteria, that we won't have to consider that seawater intrusion on the bottom there. That actually really applies just to the coastal GSAs. So each GSA within the state will have different solutions and issues that they're dealing with, very unique to their own challenges. As I mentioned earlier, we have a complex geology. We're going to have to look at that to understand what's going on in our area, and then we'll have to understand to what degree we have these issues and how will we manage them to sustainability. As I said earlier, there was 266 of these GSAs that were formed. 7 of them cover what's called the Keene Subbasin, and you can see on this slide, and the different colored areas represent those 7 GSAs. We're down there on the lower part with the red arrow. What you should know about this is that although each of these GSAs are writing their own groundwater sustainability plan, in the end, they're going to have to coordinate those plans and understand how each area is impacting the other, because this is required by the law. The state does not want to say the North Fork Kings is sustainable. They want to say the Keene Subbasin is sustainable, and they're going to be looking at the basin as a whole. So there's a lot of coordination and collaboration that will have to occur. And this is just a close-up look at our particular GSA, and also shows you in relationship to where we are within our Keene Subbasin there on the left-hand corner. Just to give you an idea of how our particular GSA was formed, beginning in early 2015, we started meeting soon after the law was passed in 2014, and there were a lot of local cities, irrigation districts, the county, small community service districts, other public agencies with water and land use authority that were starting to meet to figure out how we're going to comply with this new law. We actually formed as a special act agency through legislation. This is similar to how the Kings River Conservation District was formed. We have 15 member agencies. I'm going to show you a list of those in a minute. We divided ourselves into 7 divisions that have a representative board member for each division. And one thing that is specific to our act is that we have also a Rural Community Advisory Committee, and this committee was formed to represent the interest of rural communities. Similar, as you know, you may be aware, we have Lanier, Riverdale, and Layton within our service area. This is to show you how all the different agencies have formed into different divisions and who their representatives are currently on the board. So you can see that list. If you're in one of those irrigation districts, one of the mutual water companies, some areas are not in any agency, and that's represented by the County of Fresno. Those are the undistricted areas. In the law, you have to have the entire basin covered by a GSA, and so any agency that was not covering an area, the county stepped up, and made sure those areas were covered so that we could be compliant. So the North Fork Kings Board is committed to transparency in public decision processes and to stakeholder participation. We ask you to get involved by participating in workshops like this or meetings we conduct, including our board meetings. The more you as a stakeholder can contribute your own knowledge and experience, the better the outcome for developing the plan and the solutions for achieving sustainability. So here's a list of when we meet. We would invite you to come to our next board meeting on April 25th at 5:30. In the future, we're going to be conducting a lot of stakeholder outreach, some additional workshops that are going to be specific to developing the groundwater sustainability plan. So we hope you can participate in those also. But if you can't, I want to recommend that you visit our website regularly. It's very robust. We update it constantly with meeting and event information. We write up about what is going on with our board. We have a page devoted right now to our 2018 election. We also will have a page devoted to our groundwater sustainability plan. So hopefully you can visit that and keep updated with us if you can't participate with us in person. I am now going to turn the presentation over to Eric so we can get right down to hearing about the assessment. Thank you.
Eric Osterling, Kings River Conservation District. I'm here to give you a presentation on what we really want you to know, and that is specifically about Proposition 218 election that we will be sending ballots out for fairly shortly. Let me just advance the slide here. Give me a second. Okay, on this slide, this isn't really meant to be studied in detail. That's not my hope in having this slide. It was really meant to illustrate the level of detail that went into preparing the budget for this 2018 election. We worked with our board and stakeholders for the better part of 2.5 to 3 months in order to try to forecast exactly how much this whole program is going to cost, or at least in the near term for the primarily development of the first groundwater sustainability and for the area. Since this is a new program, it's very difficult to forecast things that are relatively unknown. The primary thing that we were fairly certain of is what our budget needs were going to be for the next fiscal year, and so this assessment was largely based on that. It's important to understand that a Prop 218 election is the voters' authorization of a not to exceed amount. When voting yes on this election, the assessment we have proposed is a $10 assessment, and that would be a maximum. So we do know that it's highly likely that the first year it will be $10 per acre, but in future years, the assessment may be less than that depending on the budgetary needs set by the board of directors. The forecast is based on reasonable assumptions, and we realize that it's very expensive, and this is an unfunded mandate, as Crystal mentioned earlier. Some of the needs include funding the management and operating costs, and also to reimburse member agencies for past support. So as Crystal mentioned, we've been meeting for about 3 years now with the stakeholders in this region during the formation of the GSA and following. And during that time, the participating mutual water companies, county, and irrigation districts were passing the hat and funding this activity. Approximately 30% of the $10 assessment would go back into the pockets of those overlying entities that represent you in the North Fork Kings GSA. Some of the other activities that are really an immediate need are technical evaluation of the groundwater basin. Chris mentioned that earlier. We are going through a process on a coordinated level in the King subbasin where Provost Pritchard, the technical consultant for the subbasin, working with hydrogeologists and other technical experts, are preparing an evaluation of the basin to inform the discussion of strategies moving forward, those strategies that would be incorporated into a groundwater sustainability plan. We need to perform water monitoring. The things that we're fortunate to have in the region is that we have a lot of data. Other regions in the South Valley aren't as data rich as the King Subbasin, but you know, the quantity of data is not always the end solution. You also need to have quality data, so quantity and quality. And so the monitoring network that helps us understand what's going on beneath our feet does have data gaps and quality issues that are being identified right now, and then a future path forward that would involve improving that monitoring network is being prepared. We are coordinating, as I mentioned, with the other GSAs in the subbasin. Tight coordination is absolutely mandatory in this effort. And then ultimately, once the plan is done, we want to undertake projects for groundwater sustainability. Categorically, there are really two types of projects. There are supply side projects where you're taking advantage of additional kinds of surface water, and then demand side, which is conservation. And the ultimate goal of this GSA and others like it in the subbasin are to maximize the supply side strategies before we dive into any conservation strategies. Just a quick peek here in this slide and the next slide of where we've come and where we're headed. All of these items have been completed under Proposition 218, Article 8D, Section 4. We've identified all of the parts. We work very closely with the county, Fresno, and Kings, getting their assessor's office information to identify the parcels that are impacted. We have sent out mailers. Many probably received something in the mail from us, primarily discussing the series of workshops, this being the third workshop that we've did on the 2018 election. We have to prepare an engineer's report, so that budget table that you saw on an earlier slide, that's contained in the engineer's report. The engineer's report is prepared by the technical consultant for the North Fork Kings. It has pretty much less to do with engineering than it has to do with financial layout. It's available from our website. You go to the Prop 218 page, you can download it and review it. It calculates the proposed assessment, and then the board, following approval of the engineer's report, sets public hearing date, and that date is May 9th. I'll have that also in a later slide here. These are the things that we do have to do. We need to notice landowners and provide the balloting. We need to conduct a public hearing that needs to occur no less than 5 days after the noticing. So that, again, May 9th. And then other minutia or administrative requirements that are important too, but just not tasks. So we're asked quite often about, what does this really mean for me? And different landowners calculate things quite, somewhat differently. For residential property owners, a typical residential parcel is about 1/4 of an acre. So at this proposed $10 per acre assessment, that would come out to about $2.50 per parcel per year. For a small 40-acre agricultural parcel at $10 per acre per year, you would that landowner would pay $400 per parcel. There is an alternative. There's always options, and the primary option to or alternative to not passing this 218 election and succeeding local management is state intervention. And so I think something that is sometimes missed is that there's no way really out of some form of an assessment, whether it's from the local groundwater sustainability agency or the alternative of the state coming in and applying an assessment to that same property. So the state can come in and assume control of the responsibilities of the GSA. It'll fund its operations and oversight through involuntary fees, So there will not be any Prop 218 election or Prop 26 or what. It would just be an involuntary fee. And those fees can include, regulation filing fees per well. So there are certain privileges of local management, and those include privately maintaining surface water rights. So the state also has in its discretion to come in and curtail surface water and use it for the purposes of their sustainability objectives. That would be by an interim groundwater sustainability plan that they would develop. That plan would likely not be very creative. It would focus almost entirely on groundwater pumping curtailment. So any of the technical reports or studies that we would need would be on top of it. One thing that they have done to help us understand better, what their costs might entail is to develop a fee schedule, and I'll show you those numbers here. So this is an infographic that shows those fees, and so really this can be used to apply to your unique situation as a landowner. The base filing fee would be a flat $300, and that doesn't matter if you're an ag well, a municipal well, or private well owner. And then on top of that, they'd apply a volumetric rate, and so they would, and it would be in that second tier under probationary, because following successful compliance with the formation of a groundwater sustainability agency by the middle of last year, we are no longer unmanaged. And we would be probationary if we were to not be able to comply with the next milestone, which is to develop a compliant groundwater sustainability plan by January of 2020. And then if there was any late payment, there would be a late fee. So again, using these two examples of a average quarter-acre municipal household parcel, that $2.50 roughly goes up to about $60 for the first year, and then that 40-acre ag parcel would go up to about $7,450 for the first year, or about $180 per acre. So the next steps, we are going to continue our public outreach. The better job that we do getting the message out there informs the landowners who are impacted by this regulation. We will be, as I mentioned earlier, noticing the landowners and providing the balloting. The public hearing is scheduled for May 9th. That is when ballots are due. At that time, the board will tally the ballots and certify the results. We do have a third-party consultant that is in the business of balloting and elections, and so they are handling everything. We're pretty much, as staff and the board are pretty much hands-off. And then if the election passes, and this isn't entirely correct actually, the assessments would go onto the county tax rolls in the fall of 2018, and that January 2019 is when the GSA would likely receive its first check from the counties. Okay, so this comes to the part of our event here where we will take questions. The $10 assessment is actually the most common. Some are taking a more backloaded, keeping things light on the front end of what they're working on to develop their GSPs, and so they're slightly less. Some of them, the fee structure is different too. So in certain areas, they are able to immediately apply a volumetric pricing structure as opposed to just a flat average-based assessment. We don't have that level of information in the North Fork Kings GSA to do that. I can tell you that the proposed assessment to the south of us in the South Fork Kings GSA, which is a little more in Stratford, it's also about $10. Tri-County Water Authority, which is in the Alpa area, $10. Up in the North Kings, which is the Fresno metropolitan area, Fresno Irrigation District, and Clovis and Fresno, they're more, I believe. So it's something too where the water managers managing these GSAs are communicating regularly to try to compare their notes to make sure that we're providing the least cost option for our constituents in this region. Say that we are in the Kings subsystem from a water supply standpoint. The Kings River alone is a very it's one of the best sources, local sources of surface water in the region. And when you look at the preliminary information we have for our groundwater overdraft versus what we still have available on the supply side, or floodwater that in the wettest of wet years leaves the system out to the ocean, we can engineer to capture that water and offset significantly the amount that we'll have to reduce pumping to meet the overall objectives. So that in the end, the plan is going to be pretty consistent across the region for how much it's going to cost to prepare, but then later on during the implementation phase, depending on the severity of the resource issue, the cost will likely be for GSAs that have those more severe issues to implement projects. I can't say for certain. It's the direction that things are going right now. It's to be determined. It's really one of those, it has to be decided and agreed upon between the 7 GSAs. I think that in particular, you're going to see a number of workshops that are more region-wide, more one GSA. The preliminary technical memoranda released for public comment, and I would expect those in particular would be publicly noticed so that board members from each of the GSAs could attend without violating the act. That hasn't been determined yet either. There's nothing in the act that requires it. I'll say that. There are alternatives to metering, and alternatives are primarily through remote sensing of using satellite imagery and knowing certain things for X, and the X being pump. And so if you have a good knowledge of land use information, crop coefficients for applied water, soils, rainfall data, all the other inputs that go into what you would need in order to back your way into a pumping number. There are certain areas that that will probably be the strategy if definitely for the near term, hopefully for the long term also. That's a good suggestion. Actually, if I'll take it as a suggestion because they're not currently. That's something we'll have to talk about logistically to see if we can do that. But I certainly, as staff, wouldn't have any problem doing that. We'll check in with the board at the next board meeting on that.